A little vole told me you were interested in growing moss. Now what I focus on is Venus flytraps, growing Venus flytraps indoors, and I know a lot of people in the carnivorous plant community are familiar with sphagnum moss, for example, because that's a pivotal moss in a lot of habitats for carnivorous plants. You don't have to be into carnivorous plants to want to grow moss. Moss is pretty cool. I'll show you how I purposely propagate moss. It's pretty simple. It works pretty well. You just have to do it well, you know. Let's go check it out. Come on. When I found this moss, it was a beggar in the streets. It was being trampled on the ground of a nursery. No one gave this moss a second thought. No one saw the promise in this moss that I saw in this moss. I took only a square inch of this moss, maybe a little more, I can't remember. And then I propagated it, and before I knew it, I had this little field of moss I like to refer to as. This is my sphagnum. I assure you it's doing very well. I know there's some like blackened tips and some brown tips. That's just because of the dry environments I've had to take it through here and there. I just moved. So here we are closer and you can see the juiciness. I just watered this one like yesterday, so I've got it pretty flooded. Would you believe this fro of moss started off halfway down that container down there? You can kind of see it underneath the water. It was way down there, and then it sprouted all the way up there. The way I do my mossy takeover is like this. I love sandy soils, but you don't really need a sandy soil to do this. You can even use the dirt that it came on, the moss that is. You take your soil, in this case the sandy soil that I grow my Venus flytraps in. You take some sharp little scissors, and you chop up the live moss. Right here I've got a bag of live sphagnum moss that I can propagate from anytime. You chop up the live moss and you sprinkle it over your media, whatever you're growing on top of, and then you take some more of that media and sprinkle it on top of the chopped up little bits of moss. And then you take a little sprayer like this glorious machine and you spray on top of the whole shebang. I do these last two steps because it anchors the little moss plants down, and I believe it's the reason for my success with cultivating different mosses. So you sprinkle the little moss bits down, and then you sprinkle some media on top of it. And then you mist it all down. Not really mist it, you kind of like spray it down with the sort of mist setting, you know, something soft. What that does is the water allows the media to settle down on top of and around and betwixt all the little moss bits, so that the moss bits are always in contact with the soil, and through capillary action they'll always stay damp as long as the soil's damp. Sometimes I let my Venus flytraps get a taste of dryness just before I water them again, but if I'm going to plant moss on them like this one, I'm not going to let it get a touch dry at all. I'm going to keep topping off the water before it hits the bottom, just so that the soil can stay moist enough for the moss to take hold. Once the moss has formed a good enough colony, it's pretty resilient though. Different mosses have different needs though. For example, sphagnum here seems to love being waterboarded. I can flood it and it'll just spring right back up. It'll come up taller than before. It loves it. Loves it, loves it. But this moss up here doesn't like it. I could give it some hefty watering, but if I let it sit like underwater or right at the water level for too long, it'll start taking some damage. Yeah, and just use clean water. And I'm talking about distilled water, you smart Alex, not water that hasn't been involved in criminal activity. I just moved. There's a lot more space here than there was at my old place. I'm excited for this. I plan to expand my collection and just do overall better in life. So I'm excited for the future. Everything I'm doing is deliberate. Good stuff. Now grow that moss. Ooh, I almost forgot. Make sure your moss is getting plenty of light. They seem to love that stuff. Of course, don't roast your plants, put them in direct sunlight outside where they don't get enough moisture, and then watching them burn to a crisp. Make sure they're always damp, and make sure they're somewhere bright. We will meet again, I promise you. Hey, let me say hi to everybody. Cool. I awoke today and suddenly nothing happened. But in my dreams, I slew the dragon.